Welcome to Huff-N-Stuff podcast, where we have fun discussing board games, card games, and entertainment for the casual gamer. Brought to you by the Southwest Valley Gaming Group. We invite you to visit our website at huffandstuffpodcast.webs.com. And here are your hosts, Rob Huffman and Hans Hemans.
My name is Rob Huffman.
And Hans Hemans.
This is December 29th, Episode 2.
The Lucky Episode.
That's right. We're going to talk today about luck versus strategy in board games, what our passion is with board games. So, Hans, why don't you jump in here?
I guess, this is our second podcast, and I was just really thinking about what about board gaming made me want to sit and talk with you for an hour every week, 2 hours every week, something, and share with everybody my thoughts. And I guess I found out that I really like to introduce games to people and find out, what they think of a game. And what better way to find out what I think of a game, what you think of a game, and maybe what our listeners think of a game is talk about it and then make myself available to questions, comments, and see if people get on my same train of thought. I also started to write reviews on BoardGaming.com and BoardGameGeek, and I really like to see what people said or if they found it helpful or not, because I want everybody else to have a really, really good experience with board gaming, just like I did. And I want people to help people because it's so daunting. There's so many games out there. There's so much information, and I don't feel like I'm just adding to add. I want to add to help people. And another thing that I'm really passionate about is making the game really fun. And my dad, we play this game called Hero Quest. It's a really big, popular game, and it's a dungeon crawl. And my dad was the DM. He was the dungeon master, and he would, really get into it and and be the bad guy. And I wanted to replicate that for other people who play with me and who want to get into those kind of emotions and those feelings of playing board games. That's just kind of like reasons why I want to sit here and talk and share my knowledge and my passion with everybody.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have some really great history with board games, and I think that is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people really get into board games and why they come back to it. Because like I know in our first episode, you and I had talked about some of the history of where we had been in the gaming world and what sort of turned us on to it and all that. And I think a lot of this has to do with our histories. And family is pretty big, and you just talked about your dad. And obviously he played a pretty big role in your life and with games, and I think that's true with my dad as well. I mean, you could say that our parents are some of the biggest influences in children's lives and our adult lives as we go on. But I know with my dad, Yahtzee and Uno, I've said this before, but when we would go on vacation to camping or whatever, those games, we had a blast with them. They're so simple and so no-brainer, but those are good for kids. And my mom's not a big gamer by any stretch of the imagination. So, everyone could do it, and everyone could have a great time. But I think part of what Hans and I are trying to say in this first part of the show is that we wanted to basically share our passion with you guys. And that's why we're ultimately doing the podcast, because we want to entertain you guys at the same time, inform you guys as well. And we are here because we enjoy what we do. We enjoy the activity, but we also want to hope that this bleeds off onto you by you being an audience.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that we're just another avenue where people can listen and learn and enjoy.
Guys, now it's time to talk about what we've been playing recently.
Hans, why don't you start with some of the games you've been playing?
Recently, the one that comes right to my mind because it was so fun was when we played in our Thursday night board game night, and that was Letters from Whitechapel. And Rob, I had the pleasure of getting to play this game with you, and I just want to pick your brain about how you think it went. I guess I'll run you down how from Jack the Ripper's point of view. So let's back up the truck just a second. Letters from Whitechapel is a fantasy flight game. It is a deduction kind of what's that other one? Mystery of the Abbey. That's another style game where one player in this game, one player takes the role of Jack the Ripper, and he's going around Whitechapel. The board is a fabulous map of Whitechapel of England, and it's just beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I agree. The artwork on this is pretty nice. Of course, most Fantasy Flight games are. The map of London is really nice.
Yeah, I second that completely. So one person takes the role of Jack the Ripper, and the other players are investigators. They're the policemen. They're the investigators of Jack the Ripper, and they are trying to find out where Jack's hideout is. In doing so, Jack has to go out and murder these poor wretches, they call them in the game, these poor women. And each round has two parts called Hell and the Haunting, and Hell is where Jack decides which woman he's going to murder, and the hunting is when the police officers, the investigators, they try to find out where Jack has been. And I was voted to be the Jack player, and I was a little worried about that because I thought, you know what, I think my skills of communicating, talking through problems.
Well, the thing about that is that I suggested that, by the way.
Yes, you did.
Because a lot of the reviewers said that the person who's most experienced with the game should be Jack because it's the hardest one to play.
I would agree. It was a very difficult position to be in. However, you kind of revel in that difficulty of, can I outsmart these four people, and they're constantly on my trail, and can I get back to it, and can I throw them off the scent? And they have these certain tokens. There's coach tokens and alley tokens you can use, but only so many. And each round, there's less and less for you to use as Jack the Ripper. That makes it much more difficult. However, that being said, top-notch game. I really, really enjoyed it. I definitely want to see what it's like to be on the other side of the board and see and not see everything. To me, I saw every step I took. I'm writing out my path. I'm determining where I'm going to go. There were no secrets. Yeah, there was no secrets for me on my side, and for you guys, it seemed a lot of fun. And I think that, Rob, the investigators were really helped out by you had a lot of really intelligent players who really communicated well, and there was no callback here. There was no alpha player in the group. Everyone was really contributing equally. What do you think about that?
Well, I have to say this game can be a bit frustrating. Let me just say that right away. It seemed like so many misses on that game. Like in the game, you, as the investigator, you can either make an arrest, or this is what they call it, make an arrest, or you can do a search. And in the game, you can have. There's so many times where you make one of those suggestions, and it's a negative. Like, no, that's not where he is, or whatever. And this is really frustrating because it's like a failure in a way. It's like a failure. I don't want to make it sound that way because it sounds kind of negative, but at the same time, that's kind of what it is.
But in the same sense, a failure is still a success because you now know nothing was there. Jack was never there, so you can cross that number from off your list this turn. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to be there next turn, but you still, as little information as you had, you still gathered information, whether right or wrong, in those situations.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. It was just very frustrating. One of the gentlemen that was there, he was an older guy, I think about my age. He was a gentleman that every time I come, he's the one of the guys that I don't want to say worry about, but he's just one of these guys that I'm not real sure about, but he did great. He took over. He was intelligent about what he was saying. I would say, well, that we think Hans is going this way, or we think he's doing this way, and then he would come in and he goes, but if he did that, he had really good deduction skills, I think.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a couple times he tried to start telling other people what to do. He sort of went a little bit that way, and that's why I was like, well, Donna, what do you think? And I pointed to one of the gals there. Her name was Donna, of course. And I pointed to her, and because I wanted him to and he backed off, which really worked out good.
Yeah, I think part of it was just his. I think he really enjoyed the game, so he really got into it and kind of ran with it. And he jumped on every opportunity to try to deduce and try to figure things out, and I think he got kind of in his own world and forgot other people were there.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But then once he heard somebody else's opinion, he let it go with it and decided to go. I think it was fantastic. Again, back to the role of Jack the Ripper. I was self-conscious about every answer I gave. They'd be spouting on numbers. Is there a clue at 105, 104, 98, 96? And I always had to think about, okay, do I hesitate when I answer this question? Because make them think, is he checking his ledger of where he's been? Do I say it right away to make them think, okay, he said it right away, there's nothing there. So I was really playing an inside game as well as an outside game. I had to think about where I wanted to go next, but I also had to think about how are they going to see my responses. And to me, actually, the most difficult part of the game was looking at the numbers and deciding where I wanted to go next, because sometimes I couldn't see the number I wanted to go to next, and if I moved someone's pawn or got up and looked directly at it, you guys would have known. It was very hard to be sneaky about knowing where to go. I figure the more games you play, the more you realize where the numbers lay, because it's not a very... They try to make it as numerical order as possible, but it's very difficult because there's so many spots.
Well, I think if you have a set amount of folks that you meet every week, and if I wish I had that set amount of people that I met every week, because then we would just play, like, for example, Whitechapel every week, and then we would really, every time we play, 3 or 4 times should probably be enough, but we'd play it a lot, so by the 4th time it'd be really interesting because we would know the game really well. That game, just like a lot of other games, would need more playings to really enjoy the most that it had to offer, I think, just like most games. But that game, it's a winner for sure.
Yeah, another well put together game by Fantasy Flight, and another one in my stable that I'd like to get out, play again, see the different roles, and play Jack again and see how much better I can play as Jack.
Well, and we went to California for the holidays, my wife and I, of course, the kids, and I pulled out with my brother, and my wife and I played a few games. One of them was Starfarers of Catan. Now, this is a game I picked up at a used game sale. And at our game store, twice a year they will have, I think it's called a biannual, is how you say it, for 2 times a year?
Yeah, biannual.
A biannual used game sale where you can come and sell your games. Anyways, we went there, and I go every time because I love buying new used games, and I picked up Starfarers. And at the time I looked at the box, it was like, this doesn't look very interesting. I mean, it's kind of old, but my wife had done some research, and when I called her on the phone, I go, here are the games that are here, and this is what we usually do. I go through and I name off some things, because what I would like is I would like my wife to be involved with games as much as possible. If I can get her involved with games, hell, that's another gaming group. If it's just her and me, yeah, it's only 2 players, but if someone else comes over, that's 3 right there. Now we've got a gaming group, so I want my wife to be involved. So whenever I go or I buy a game, I always keep her in mind. So I called her up, and she goes, "Oh no, I know Starfarers quite well from the internet, and oh, that's a neat game." Come to find out, this game will probably be in my top 10 of all times. I really mean that. This is, and I wrote 2 reviews online for this game because I think that it doesn't get enough press. It's basically Settlers of Catan in space, and instead of having a modular board, which Settlers of Catan has these hexagons, as you know, and you move them around each time, so it's a little different. This has a set board, and you put the numbers in on each planet, and then you flip over the numbers, and that's where the different bases are, or the different planets and the different numbers. So when you take that planet over, you get that, and more than one person can be at a planet. It's a system where there are 2 or 3 planets. So you can come on that, and let me tell you, this game, if you're not familiar, you look it up. It's an amazing game, completely underrated.
So this is a Settlers of Catan game, but not Settlers of Catan?
It's Settlers of Catan in space.
Okay.
And not only that, but the style is like Buck Rogers from the 1950s style, where there are these like rocket ships with the rivets on the outside. And I'm telling you, if you can go online and look at them, the images of the ships and everything, it's just awesome.
Yeah. So I want a little bit more information about it, because you got my interest definitely piqued here. What's the goal to win? What are you trying to do in order to win? Because in Catan, obviously, you're trying to build the largest empire and get victory points.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Okay. It's exactly like that. You're getting victory points through... I'm trying to think here you get them through certain things. Like you'll get a victory point, like in Settlers of Catan, you get one for the longest road, or you get one from having a certain number of buildings, right? Like your base building, and then you have a city building, right? You've got each thing you get points for. It's similar in this game too, but you have more ways of getting points. Like maybe you have an extra lasers on your ships. Well, that's an extra point. You get from a star base, you get an extra point for that. It literally is Settlers of Catan, not 2.0, but 5.0. It really is a jump, I think. Yeah. And Settlers of Catan, don't get me wrong, I love that game. We've talked about that before on the first episode. Awesome game. It changed the world, really, in my opinion. But this one takes it up on steroids. It really is an awesome game. And let me tell you, top 10 game. And I will play Settlers of Catan again, but it really is that good. Now, there's a few others I've played, like Ventura. We bought at the Fantasy Flight used games. Not used game. It was a new game. But
Christmas sale or something.
It's a Christmas sale that you told me about. Thank you very much. I bought 8 games from that. I'm a little poor now. But that game is okay. That's an okay game. I don't want to go into these other two too much because we spent a lot of time on Starfarers. But also, I bought again at the used game sale, I bought Conquer of Planet Earth, where you're the aliens and you try to kill. That's a good game, too. I don't care for it, but I bought it as a gift for someone else, and they loved it. So it was a success as far as a gift goes. Those are the things we've been playing recently.
Baby, it looks like it's gonna hail. Baby, it looks like it's gonna hail.
And now, it's time for Word of the Day.
And as that amazing intro said, it's now time for Word of the Day. Today's word or phrase is press your luck. This is a type of game where players can repeatedly choose to perform a random event on their turn. They temporarily collect points each time, but usually receiving nothing on the turn if an unfavorable event happens. They must voluntarily end their turn to get those points, or the last turn is what they receive no matter what comes up. Some examples of this in games are Can't Stop, Ink and Gold, Pass the Pigs, and a personal favorite of mine, King of Tokyo. Rob, what's your knowledge of Pass Your Luck games?
I have played King of Tokyo and I have played Can't Stop. Those are really good games. In fact, Can't Stop is a classic. It's a good one. I played it a long time ago. I don't remember much about it. I just remember it being a solid game. The others I've recently been playing. I shouldn't say recently, but I used to have Infiltration, and that was a press your luck thing where it was a cyberpunk where you go in and you try to steal data tokens and then you come back out. Also, recently, thanks to Hans, I bought the Adventures from the Fantasy Flight, the Temple of Horus from Fantasy Flight. Used again, I keep saying used. It's their new games, and that's a pretty good game too. It's a pressure luck kind of thing as well. What I find great about these games is that you're kind of playing against the game, but you're kind of not. You're playing against other players, but it's like you're both kind of racing against the devil, in essence. You're playing against that devil, which is the end game. And so in a sense, it sort of diffuses a bit of the conflict that might be between you and your opponent. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that's really good about it.
Yeah, I like the press your luck games, but there can be moments in those press your luck games where your whole game plan is shot because on that last roll, small example, King of Tokyo, on that last roll, if you do damage, all of a sudden you have to go in. So you have to ask yourself, is this worth one more roll to try to get more hearts or more energy or to chase that dragon, that one last thing that I really need? But conversely, I could be doing something I really don't want to do. And I think that adds a lot to games. I think you can have those moments in a game where you're like, yes, everything came up exactly where I wanted, and moments in the game where, shoot, I should have stopped. I should have... And it makes you think of real-life situations where, hey, I'm driving my car. I'm almost on E. Do I press my luck and try to get to the next exit, or do I just get off and get my gas now? It's something that's very, very interesting. It's something that's very, very... It can be used very, very well in games.
Right, and I do have to say that I agree with exactly what you're saying. These kind of games are popular because of what you're saying. Because of this, everyone is sort of against the game in a sense, even though it's not a cooperative game necessarily. but it's like that. I think one of the negatives behind these kind of games is that generally what ends up happening is that one or two guys are doing really well, and there's maybe one or two guys that get screwed because they get the luck or they get something in their favor, and then the other people are just kind of sitting there. So it's just like any other form of entertainment or games, is that it does have good and bads in those type of games.
And I going along with you about this, how your turn affects other people with this press your luck. A lot of games, there's that downtime. Well, it's not my player's turn, or it's not my turn to go, so I'm going to sit here and just wait. And a lot of times in those adventure games or strategy games, it doesn't really matter what the other person does because you're just waiting. But in your press your luck game, that other person who's right to the side of you that is watching what you roll and says, you know what? Aha! You damaged me in King of Tokyo. I get to leave and heal myself, and you have to go in. And all of a sudden, their game is affected by the pressing of your luck and pushing it to that nth degree. One more try, one more attempt, and all of a sudden, their game is affected by it. And I think that's a really awesome thing to keep everyone engaged during someone else's turn.
Definitely, press your luck games, a lot of fun.
And now it's time for our main topic.
That's right, Elise. It is time for our main topic. Thank you very much. And today we will be talking about, just like we said in the opening statement or our title, it's luck versus strategy. And Hans, why don't you start off with this part of the segment?
All right. A lot of times, I'm trying to decide what games to play, and I have to ask myself, okay, is this something that I can sit back and enjoy, or is this something that I have to really dive into and put my mindset into solving, working, and winning? And that's basically, I think, where this idea of luck versus strategy came in. Luck games, I'll go in, I might have a little bit of strategy, but I know there's going to be things that are out of my control. So I don't really dive too deep into getting stressed over the game. And to me, that leads to more of a fun event, a fun experience. Whereas a strategy game, when I sit down to play games that I know are strategy-based and every move counts and I have to make the most of every move, then it's a little bit more stressful. I start to get those, sweaty pits, and I start wondering, what's this guy doing? I'm trying to... And those games have their place, and I can really enjoy those games. Sitting down with some of the people I've played with board games in the past, I love it because I like to see where I stack up against what I think is a good gamer. However, they can be stressful. They can be overwhelming at times with the rules. But they can be very rewarding when you do that thing you wanted, when you outscore that person, when you beat them to somewhere that they wanted to go and utilize. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the dice versus hand management is a topic that people have long talked about in regards to board games. And what we're talking about here is that luck thing. And I would submit that, now this is, maybe I'm going out on a bit of a limb here, but your best games have quite a bit of luck to them. Too much strategy, and then that is going to feel like too much of a puzzle that you are controlling, and then it kind of loses a bit of, oh gosh, it's hard to say. Maybe you have an idea about that, but too much,
the gameness of it,
maybe. But and then if you have too much luck, then it doesn't really feel like a game. It's just kind of like, flipping a coin every time.
Let's sit in the corner and just roll dice.
Right. You've nailed it on the head. And I think what a good game does in the end is balance.
Yeah.
Just like a good relationship between two people, there's balance. Usually you're attracted to someone who is not like you. If you're outgoing, you're not going to generally be interested in someone who's just as outgoing as you. There's that balance. And I think board games, you can I would submit that it's similar in that regard. That a good game has a balance of luck and strategy. There's a bit of both in a good, solid game.
Yeah, and to go back to your dice versus hand management, dice obviously being on the luck side of it, you can't control your dice. You can control the odds and try to get more dice to roll at something or to up your player to get a better percentage of a success. However, you can never control what comes up on those dice. Whereas a hand management, you can decide, okay, I'm going to need to hold on to these cards for later. I'm trying to play an end game where I'm just going to hold, and then hopefully be able to buy and do something that I really want to do. Or I'm going to start playing many small little things here and there and control my hand and take what's given to me each round.
Right.
You have a little bit more control over that. Another element to go along with that dice versus hand management is the random tile placement of a boards and a lock board. You go in and you play a game like Risk. Every single time you play Risk, you know what countries surround North America. You know what countries surround Germany. You develop a strategy to defend certain areas. Whereas, Settlers of Catan, every time you go to the game, it's different. You have no control over it.
Right, and I do have a tendency to like random tile placement on a board game, like you said, like Settlers of Catan. It's a perfect example. Every time it comes up, it's a little different. And one of my all-time favorite games is Mage Knight. And I tell you, I'm in love with this game, and it's from day one to now, it's not changed. It's like Settlers of Catan in that way, where it has what I guess another way of putting it is it's a modular board. It's where you have these random tile placements. So yes, what you're doing, and you could argue that the random tile placement adds replayability, just like a bit of, that's why oftentimes why dice and that luck adds interest to a game, because if you know it, you could technically argue that it's a pure strategy game or a game with pure planning involved. It's going to get boring after a while, because you could potentially work out a strategy and play it every time. Mm-hmm. So you need luck and randomness to a game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have played Agricola on my iOS, my iPad, my iPhone continuously, and I've just tried, all right, I'm going to do this strategy, and I'm going to do it over and over and over again, and I'm going to see how many times I'm going to win it, or I'm going to try this one. And because it's a set, when I take that action, that's what the action is. There's no randomness to that action. The most randomness Agricola has is how long you're going to wait on it in order to get it. That's the most randomness. Enough randomness, I think, to make the game very good. I don't want to knock the game. It's one of my top 10. I really, really like the game. However, you can find a strategy. All right, I'm going to plow, and I'm going to farm, or I'm going to build fences, and I'm going to herd, and I'm going to grow animals. But that strategy is going to be the same each time. If you're going to try to populate animals, that strategy doesn't really change. You're always trying to populate animals. Whereas other games, okay, in Settlers of Catan, I want to build cities. Well, that could be gone if wheat and ore are our 2s and 11s.
Right, and that's why I was about to say that if there's randomness to a game, is basically, I think, kind of what we're talking about here. Luck, randomness, kind of the same thing in a way when it comes to board games. And I believe that makes it not only the game fresh, but it keeps you on your toes. You can't just come out with, you can have a somewhat of a strategy, but just like a good coach on a football team or a basketball team, you've got to adapt. Mm-hmm. And that's where a game really becomes kind of fun, I think, when you've got some bit of randomness and you alter a bit your plans and modify it to fit what you have in front of you.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's a fantastic thing about most board games that we have had the pleasure of playing is that randomness, even in the most strategic game, is the people sitting around you. You can sit there and not know what somebody else is going to do. They might not know the game very well, so all of a sudden they're going to take an action that you didn't expect them to take, and all of a sudden your game plan is ruined.
Right, and I heard you bring up the awe versus ugh factor. And I think what you're talking about was surprise factor, right?
Yeah, and the like you're playing a game and you really need something to happen, and it happens, and you have that eureka moment. Yes, ha! I rolled 5s and 6s, and it happened.
Yeah.
And the ugh factor is that, I gotta sit here through another round where I can't do anything because my strategy didn't work out, and I'm sitting here waiting for the game to end because I put all my hens in one basket and it's over. It's done with. I can't do anything with it. And to me, those luck games have more of those factors and those moments in those games where, I knew that I had to have this come up. And it did. Conversely, it does. Those luck games have those moments where you could have placed yourself on all the right places and done all the right things, and all of a sudden you get that 1, or you roll that 2 and your character dies, or you don't get that resource you need, or something bad happens, and you have no control of it, and you say, I just played for 25 minutes. I just played for an hour, and I went down to 1 roll of the dice. Are you kidding me?
That does happen. And unfortunately.
Yeah. Where conversely, someone could sit there and play a perfect strategy, and they could have their aha moment because they just wiped the floor with you, and every single thing that they did and every move that they made was in a planned, concise portion of their game.
Well, and this also could be helpful, a bit of luck to the person who has played the game the less, or the least, I should say. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about here. It's good. Like some of these games, like these dice games, are really great, and I think that's why King of Tokyo does so well, because it is good for the beginner, and it's good for. I mean, you could come in and know the rules very little, and you could do just as well as the guy who's played it 10 times. Yeah. That's the beauty of a good game, and that's why King of Tokyo does so well, because it has a very nice part of that luck involved.
And I agree with you that. Another thought of mine with the strategy versus luck. Beginning gamers. I think a lot of beginning gamers would struggle with a strategy game. And from what I've heard on reviews about heavy strategy games, a lot of times they say, well, if you make the wrong decision in the first 10 minutes, you're sitting there for the next 45 minutes, hour and a half, upset because you can't do anything. Whereas in these luck games, it can change at the moment of one roll, of the moment of one card draw. It can... it's those luck games are kind of like Mario Kart. You're at the end of the game, you get the block, and you're the bullet, and you zoom up halfway through the ranks. It's that one thing. You know that you're one move away, you're one roll away, you're one draw away from being right back in this game. And I think that for beginner gamers, luck is a huge thing.
It makes it less stressful for that beginning player, and this is why some of the games, like we keep going back to King of Tokyo, but I think that's one of the reasons why people love it so much, because it that luck really helps people like that.
Yeah, I think it opens games up to more casual gamers and puts less stress on the game itself. It's less stressful. It's more of I couldn't do anything about it. Just what you rolled, and I think it makes the experience more easygoing and fun. And when you want to introduce people, and even if you just want to break it out. Sometimes you just want to have fun with it.
Right.
And sit back and at the end of it not say, oh, I really should have done this instead of that, but sit back like, man, I can't believe it. Remember when you rolled all those 6s? What was that about?
So why don't you tell me some of the games that you love that have more luck versus strategy involved with it? Because we all kind of know what what games are really strategy. Like, I think most Euro games there's a lot of strategy and much less luck in those games. But why don't you tell me some of the games that you think have more luck in them and or randomness to them?
I think, in my mind, the best games are good mixes.
Well, and I think that when we first started talking about on this main topic, one of the things that I had suggested, or one of the words I used, was balance. And I think balance makes that game awesome, because you don't want a game all of luck. Just like we said, you were saying, you could be in the corner chucking dice, and it means really nothing, right? It means nothing. Or you could just throw down a coin and say heads or tails or whatever. Of course, I'm exaggerating a bit to make a point, and that point is that you want a good balance. And one of the games that we have brought up in the past is Elder Sign. I own that game, and it has a great bit of strategy to it, and it also has a lot of luck to it. And this is why even my high school daughter, who isn't really into board games, she really loves this game because it has a good mix. It has a good mix. She can do a little bit of strategizing, although because it's cooperative, she usually looks to me and says, "What do you want to do next, Dad?" Which is fine, because then I get to be the alpha player, which I'm so outgoing, like we talked about in the last episode, the alpha player. I can be a little bit of that alpha player, and then we can work together as a great team. And I think that this is why, this is a whole other topic for another day, but cooperative games have this. And a good cooperative game has all three of those things. It has good strategy, it has good luck, and it has that cooperation where you all work together and have a good time. And again, I'm just using Elder Sign as an example, but but this is one of those games where that it has a strong balance. And I think that Settlers of Catan, which we've talked about in the past, and we'll keep bringing it up, I think, Hans and I, because I think, and I know it's an older game, and I know a lot of people have in the industry have, like we said in the first episode, have moved on, but it holds up because it has such great balance.
And I want to second your point with that. Is Catan has great balance. It has the randomness of the tiles, it has the randomness of the dice, but it has that strategy of, you know, what numbers are the most probable. They tell you flat out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Don't live on 11 and 12 if you can help it. Don't do 2s. It tells you. But in the same sense, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine about Settlers of Catan, and he said that it's a horrible game because you start off and your strategy is based right away. And if you have a bad strategy, if you pick the wrong places to live on, you're going to sit there through the whole rest of the game, and you're not going to do anything. Whereas to me, I think that's a great balance of strategy because you see what didn't work right away. It has enough strategy that you can choose a path, and if that path doesn't work, you know why it didn't work. You know why.
Well, and let me just jump in real quick, and we could go off on a tangent here about Settlers of Catan, because that could be a whole episode on its own. But Settlers of Catan, the reason why it's so good is because you don't just have to collect A, B, or C products, or whether it's wheat or whatever product you're trying to get. There's other ways to get points, and that's the beauty of that game, is because if you're in a bad spot, getting a bad number, it doesn't come up, you could potentially, and I went online and did some research, and I found out that there's even a part of Settlers of Catan that says every 5th round you get your choice of 2 products that you aren't getting because you got a bad one, and so everyone gets 2 that they didn't get, and so that kind of helps stabilize or helps give you negate some of those problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the great changes that they made to the game. I never even knew about that rule. I never played it.
Yeah.
In such a way, but that's a fantastic way to negate that strategy and make it more.
And if it's only on the 5th round, then it's not completely like every round.
Yeah, it's not overtaking
everybody. Yes.
Yeah.
But wait, we have questions and answers too.
Okay, and like we said at the beginning of the podcast, it's December 29th, and I was, of course, going on the internet and musing over certain questions and forums. And there's a couple that I came upon that I wanted to discuss with you, Rob. The first one that I saw on here was a forum and a question about online components to board games. How to use the web to accessorize gameplay or a board game. And I thought about how board games have changed over the years. And there's games now that have soundtracks to them. And there's games that have a plethora of knowledge that you might want to know about your character or the lore of the game that you're playing. And if being online, a website, something could add to the gameplay. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, I read through this blog on BoardGamesGeek.com, which we should say is the hub of the industry. And in the first episode, we talked about it quite a bit. No, I'm not going to do that here, but this is where we get a lot of our information for the industry, or for the hobby, I should say. Now, there's a whole debate in the board gaming world with regards to technology, and some have suggested that the iOS is potentially killing the board game world. But what iOS doesn't do is it doesn't give that interaction between people, and that's what board game does brilliantly. There are a few things here that I kind of broke it down into two subject matters. One was full implementation, which means that it's completely computerized, and then there is the other part that just says just purely support. Now, if you're talking full implementation, you're talking about a computer game basically, and I don't believe most people, especially the people who produce board games, want it to go that direction.
And I completely agree with you. I think if you go too much that full integration of online, it's no longer a board game. I think the iOS, why it's becoming so popular, is there's so many gamers out there that want to continue their board gaming, but don't have people around to do it. And that offers it. The games that I've downloaded, Agricola, Elder Sign, Lost Cities, Lords of Waterdeep, they stay very, very true to the game, and I use them as a thing to play when I'm on my own, for lack of a better term, toilet time sometimes. If I can get a game in while I'm sitting doing nothing, I'm gaming. It's something
right.
I get to do, and I think that kind of online component. And the fantastic thing about those games is you can play against people online. So, yes, it's not ideal. Yes, it's not my first choice. But in a situation where I live, with my fiance, and I don't always have time to play with someone, it gives me that opportunity.
Right, to get in a quick game. And I had said this on the first episode. We have downloaded Settlers of Catan for my Xbox, which we use to watch Netflix and all that kind of. We use it as an entertainment guide to watch TV because we canceled cable because it's so expensive these days. But it came up and we're like, well, gee, I'll download it, and I played it in the morning, like I said in the first episode, before work, and it fits great. I kind of have, and maybe this is a personal preference of mine, I have a bit of a problem with playing online against somebody else. I played against the computer when I want a quick game, and I want to play against the computer and be done with it. If I'm playing online with somebody, then I had enough energy and time to go and find someone to go play a game with, whether it's Jenna, my wife, or a friend of mine, like Hans here. That's where I have a problem with this quote-unquote full implementation or computer games and all that. So anyways, but the other thing I would sort of like to delve into is the support of board games. And let me just say this, and it's in my opinion that board games would not be where they are today if it would not have been for the internet. The internet, BoardGamesGeeks.com, that some of the other sites that are out there that fully support board games and the hobby, it's completely huge, and without it, we'd be screwed. And for those people who say nay to that, they're totally not with reality, in my opinion, because the internet, the web, has completely made the hobby what it is, and getting it out, the word out, with whether it's support being rules from back in the 90s. The internet is where somebody that knew German in America translated rules from those German games, because that's where a lot of the Euro games came from, was from Germany, and they had to translate them, and some kind person in America translated all these awesome games, and that's where it exploded. Again, the internet, it supported.
I think the supporting is the huge portion of it. There was a game, it was another dungeon crawl. It was very, very unsuccessful, I think. It was called Dragon Strike, almost exactly like Hero Quest. There was one DM and a bunch of players, a dwarf, an elf, a barbarian, a thief, whatever. They go through and you reveal things, and they have this mission. As a kid, I loved that game, and it came with a VHS. And it was like the preview to the story you're about to play. And you'd pop in that VHS. It was corny, horrible claymation. It was early 90s, so the CG was horrible. However, I got to see that barbarian in real life on TV. I got to see that dragon come out, and I was scared, and I wanted to go fight it, and I wanted to go on this adventure. And it really supported the gameplay. And I think online can really do that too. YouTube, there's so many... gamers don't want to. Designers don't want to make their products too huge. They don't want to overwhelm people when they open it. A lot of times, those Fantasy Flight games, they're 20, 30-page manuals, to get through. When you're playing a board game, a lot of times my supplementation now is I watch a review, I watch a playthrough. To me, that's online supplementation to the board game. Instead of sitting through and reading about all this stuff for the next, hour and a half that I need to, I can watch 30 minutes of the first 2 rounds of a game and get 90% of the rules and the content and the steps to how to play it. And I think that's how the online can really work. Escape from the Temple is a game where it's a real life real time. They play a soundtrack and you're playing along with that soundtrack. You can do the same thing with online, but to the nth degree, to the next step. Now, I'm not a board game designer, so I can't tell you how you can implement it, but it's definitely something you can do.
And I agree. That's why I believe that for people who don't know or are new to the industry, to acknowledge or even understand where the role of board games are due to the internet. It's touched the hobby and the activity in ways that I don't even think you and I even know how great it's been for the hobby.
So another question that I came upon on the forums was this age-old question of how do you rate games?
Well, this is a whole topic for another day, really, but let's jump in here real quick, and maybe we'll make this a main topic in one of our future episodes, because really, this is a huge question, because there's been a lot of debate over rating of games. At the end of the day, I'm going to throw out my thoughts about this, and then we'll go into it here. But my main thought here is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Just like one guy is going to say this girl's more beautiful than this girl, just like a game. Someone's going to love this game because of whatever aspects of that game makes it such for him. Because you could say, oh, well, does this game have element A? And then you're going to give it 20% of your vote. And then B, does it get 50% of your vote? And have a whole formula set up and then go through all the games and do this formula. It's not going to work, because the problem is that no matter who you are, no matter what organization you are, someone's going to be bent out of shape because their game isn't represented high enough. Its beauty is in the eye of the beholder, just like it is with games. Someone might think Settlers of Catan is the be all of everything. It isn't. It isn't. It's an awesome game, don't get me wrong. But, again, to each his own.
I think that there's 2 ways of reviewing. I think there's the analytical way and the emotional way. And to me, there's no way that you can separate the 2 of them. I think the best way that you can really learn about a game is know the person who's talking about the game. I think the person who's talking about the game really conveys their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions. And if you are on par and on track with that person, then you know where they're coming from. You know that when this person says that this game is a great, X, Y, and Z about it, you understand what they mean by that. That's the emotional side of it. And that, to me, I'm more of an emotional person, so when I give a review, I have to include whether I had fun or not playing this game. I also have to understand that my idea of fun might not be your idea of fun. But my job as the reviewer, as the person giving this rating, is for you to completely understand where I'm coming from with that emotion. Why this game elicited that kind of emotion for me.
That's like in our first episode, that's one of the things that I think you and I sort of dipped our toe into the water of, is this topic. When we were talking about trying out games. I think in that first episode where we were talking about trying out as many games as possible.
And I have no doubt that in future episodes it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a process. Our listeners are going to hear our emotions towards certain games and understand that when we review and talk about another game, that all our history, all the things we've talked about in the past have gone into the review.
Right. And again, the reason why I bring that up is because this is why Hans and I have said quite a few times, you need to play as many games as possible. And this is why being involved with the board game group, and I'm involved with 2, one of my own, and then the game store that I met Hans at, and that's why one of the reasons why I do that is because, and then my wife and I also play, because you could technically argue I've got 3, but we play as many games, or I should say that's one of my goals, is to play as many games as possible so that I understand what a game and why a game is so great. So often I'll go online and I'll read reviewers, and it's like, these guys are going on and on about how great a game is. I'm like, are you crazy? It goes back to that original statement. It's eye of the beholder. It's what is good for you, and what do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy luck versus strategy like we just talked about, or are you going to enjoy something like there's a game out there called Fairy Tale, where you're just purely telling a story? We've got Gloom, the card game, and it's purely telling a story. And for so many people, they have a hard time being creative like that. And so they're going to hate that game. Personally, I love it because I'm a very creative person. But for someone who's not very creative and doesn't like that kind of thing, they're going to hate it. So it's all eye of the beholder, and you got to try as many games so you know what you like.
All right, our next podcast is going to be our best of 2013 and our New Year's resolutions in board gaming.
We're really hoping that you enjoyed this week's episode. Thanks for showing up, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining the Huff-N-Stuff podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and hope you can tune in next time. Huff-N-Stuff is brought to you by Southwestern Valley Gaming Group at swvalleygamingsgroup.webs.com. You can visit us on our webpage at huffnstuffpodcast.webs.com. That is HUFFNSTUFF podcast.webs.com. We love to hear from you, so leave us questions, feedback, or just say hi. As always, keep on smiling and game on.